Okay, so today we're going to learn about graphing. We're doing trig and we're graphing tangent and cotangent graph. Before we graph tangent, cotangent graph, I just want to briefly go over the rules of tangent graph. So the rules for tangent graph, it's almost the same thing as sine cosine graph, but there's differences. So we're given y equals a tangent bx plus c plus d. So just like the sine and cosine graph, the phase shift is bx plus c, and then you solve for b. And the amplitude is absolute value of a. The only difference is that our period is pi over b, not 2 pi over b, so that's really the difference. And then we also have vertical asymptotes where tangent is undefined. So undefined means 1 over 0, not 0 over 1. So you're going to have vertical asymptotes, and then for this, last time for their sine and cosine graph we had max and min. In this case we won't for the tangent. I mean, the amplitude is still important, but it's not going to give you your max and min. So to understand this, we'll do some more. We'll do a problem. So we are given y equals tangent of 2x. So we got to sketch 2 cycles of the function and determine the period, domain, and range. So period is 2 pi over b, so it's 2 pi, and our b is just 2, right? So our period is just pi, and then let's figure out the vertical asymptote. So we got to find out where it's undefined. So we're given tangent of 2x. We want to get pi halves, because at pi halves it's undefined because our coordinates is 1, 0. So when you take the tangent of that is 0. No, sorry, it's not 1, 0. It's 0, 1. And when you take the tangent of that, it's 1 over 0, and that makes it undefined. So we want this. So what do we have to multiply to get pi halves? So let's multiply 2 by pi fourths. And then when you simplify that, it gives you pi halves. So pi fourth is where it's undefined. And then our amplitude is just 1, so is the absolute value of just 1. Now this doesn't tell us our max or min, but it's still helpful. I'll show you why, because when we graph it. What else do we need to know? So let me just do a rough draft. I'm just going to put another one, so put it 2. Yeah, so remember how I said 1 is not our max and it's not our max and min? So I'm just going to go over 1. So now let's put in our, so we said our vertical asymptotes where we're going to use pi over 4, right? Because that makes it undefined. So here's pi over 4. And then where else is it undefined. We can keep on going, right? Pi over 4, how about 3 pi? 3 pi fourth is still makes it undefined. Right, so we just put our little dash line up vertically. Now they say 2 cycles, so we need a negative pi fourths. So we'll put it right here. Negative pi fourths. Okay, so we need 5 points, total 5 over here. So here's including the asymptote, so it's 1, 2, 3. So that's total 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So to get this point right here, what you do is you add pi fourths plus 3 pi fourths. That's 4 pi fourths over 4, and you get pi, but you divide that by 2. So you should get pi halves. So right here, this is pi halves. Okay, now this is where you need to know your unit circle. So we need a number between pi fourth and pi halves, and that is the number between pi fourth and pi half is pi thirds. So right here is pi thirds. Okay, and then we need a number between pi halves and 3 pi fours, and that number is 2 pi thirds. So that's how I got these are my critical points. So to get this one, you add pi fourths plus 3 pi fourths, and then you divide it by 2, and then you just find a number between these two numbers, between here and here. So that's how I got all these points. Now, I'm going to label this pi eighths. How I got that, what I did was, I simply just, okay, so we said that our period is pi, right? Wait, our period is pi halves, not pi. Whoops, sorry, okay, so I messed up right here. The period is not 2 pi over b, it's just pi over b. That's the sine and cosine graph, so ignore that. So it's pi over 2, right? That's our period. Pi over 2. So we said our period is pi over 2. So to find the critical point, you divide that by 4. And when you do that, you get pi eighths. So over here we have pi eighth, and then you add an extra pi eighth. That's how we got pi fourths. That's why we're not. That's the reason why we're not going to have like 5 coordinates here, 5 points like on this one. We're going to have and we'll label this negative pi eighths. We're going to only have 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, yeah, we have 5 points. Because including the vertical asymptotes, we have a total of 5. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 0 is also a point. So that's how we got pi eighths, because we divided the period divided by 4. And then when you add another pi eighths, you get pi fourths. So, okay, so Now we found our critical points. Now we just gotta find our y value. So when you plug in pi halves, right, pi halves into the function y equals tangent 2x, you get a y value of 0. So right here, you're going to have pi halves, comma 0. When you plug in the value pi thirds, you're going to get negative root. You're going to get a y value of negative root 3, which is about hold on. Negative root 3 is about negative 1.7, right? Okay, so here's pi thirds, here's negative 2. So remember how I said the absolute value is not the maximum, so this is y. So 1.7 is right here, and then pi thirds is right here. So this is pi thirds, comma, negative root 3. Okay, what about here? 2 pi thirds. If you plug in 2 pi thirds, you get positive root 3. So here's 0.7. So it'd be right around here. So this is 2 pi thirds, comma, positive root 3. So it will look something like this. Oops. So right about for this cycle, so when you plug in the value pi eighth, you get positive 1. So this is pi eighth, comma 1. And then when you plug in 0, you still get 0. And then when you plug in negative pi eighth, you get negative 1. This is pi eighths, comma, negative 1. So it will look something like this. So that is your typical tangent graph. It's kind of like the sine cosine, but the period is pi over b, and the same thing, you still get the same amplitude. Same with phase shift. The only difference is we get a vertical asymptote. So that's really the difference. Okay, now we are going to graph a cotangent graph. Cotangent, it's basically the same thing as tangent, but cotangent looks something like here. It's going to look something like this. So here's your vertical asymptote. It's going to look the opposite of tangent graph, so it's going to go like this. So that's what a cotangent is. Same rule for the tangent graph. So press pause because I'm going to erase the whole board if you need to. Okay, so here we are given y equals 0.3 cotangent 2x plus pi halves. So the same way, we gotta find the period, the phase shift, and the domain, and it's basically the tangent graph. So hold on, let's go back to the original graph. I'm missing something. So okay, so let's go back to the tangent graph. I forgot so the tangent graph was tangent 2x, right? So we know the period is pi halves, right? And then the domain, I didn't tell you the domain. So the domain was all real numbers except n pi over 4, because that's undefined, where n equals plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 5. And then the range is all real numbers, right? It's from negative infinity to positive infinity. And period, and we said the period was pi over 2. So okay, so I was missing that part for the last problem. So if you could just put that on the other problem we just did, that'd be very helpful. So I'm gonna erase it. Now we're gonna go to the next problem. Now we're gonna graph cotangent graph. So yes, so we're given y equals 0.3 cotangent 2x plus pi halves. So it's basically the same thing as tangent, right? We gotta find where it's undefined. So what is cotangent again? Cotangent is it's not y over x, it's x over y. So we need to find out our vertical asymptotes. We gotta find where it's undefined, right? So first, let's find the period. So period is pi over b, right? So it's okay, so our period is pi over b, not 2 pi over b. So it's pi, and our b is 2. So that's our period. So yeah, pi over 2. Now we gotta find where it's undefined, right? So we gotta find where cotangent's undefined. So we want to get pi. I'm gonna say we want to get pi because where pi is, the coordinate is -1, 0. So that's our that our x is this is our x, this is our y. Where cotangent is -1 over 0. So that's what we want to get pi, right? Because that'll make it undefined. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply where you see the 2x plus pi halves. I'm going to multiply that by, so we're given the 2x plus pi half. I'm going to multiply this by pi fourths, the x by pi fourths plus pi halves. Because when you do this, 2 times pi fourth is that's pi halves plus pi halves. 1 plus 1 is 2, so that's 2 pi over 2. So that's pi, and that's what we want. So our vertical asymptote is pi fourths. Wherever there's a pi fourths, you do your vertical asymptote. So, and also our amplitude is absolute value of 0.3, which is 0.3. This is not our max and min, so let me graph it. Start graphing. Okay, so over here we have pi fourths, right? Because that's how it makes it undefined. And wherever there's a pi fourths, our next value would be 3 pi fourths. So do the vertical asymptote thing. Okay, so this only gives you 1 cycle, so we need 2 cycles, so we need a negative pi fourths. Put it right here. Okay, so we need, for this cycle, we need 5 points. So 1, 2, 3, including the asymptote, so that's a total of 5. So to get this point, you add 3 pi fourths plus pi fourths, and whatever the answer is, you divide it by 2. So that's 4 pi 4, so that's pi, and then you divide that by 2. So that's how you got pi halves. And then you need a number between pi fourths and pi halves. That is pi 3. And then you need a number between pi halves and 3 pi fourths, you get 2 pi thirds, 2 pi 3. Over here we have pi 6, 0, and then negative pi 6. Right? Pi 6. So it's pi halves divided by 4. So that's pi over 8. Okay, so no, sorry, this is not pi 6, this is pi 8ths. This should be negative pi 8ths. And then how I got pi 8ths is you take the period and divide it by 4. So that's how you get pi 8ths. Okay, so now let's plug in coordinates. So when you plug in pi thirds, when you plug in pi thirds into the function y equals 0.3, you get 0.5. So here, oops, I got our y value. Here's 1. Here's negative 1. So we said that 0.5 is right here. So this point is pi thirds, comma 0.5. Pi half is 0. So this point is pi half, comma 0. This point is negative 0.5. So right here. So this is 2 pi thirds, comma negative 0.5. So it will look something like this. And then for pi eighths, you get positive 1. So right here. So this is pi eighths, positive 1. Sorry, no, it's not. I take that back. You should get positive 0.3. So here's 0.3. So pi eighth should be right here, because this is 0.3. So this is pi eighth 0.3. And then 0, 0 is still 0. Oh, sorry, I keep making mistakes. When you plug in pi eighth into the function, you should get negative 0.3. So right, it should be negative 0.3 is right here. And then 0, when you plug in 0 into the function, you get 0. And then when you plug in negative pi eighth, you should get positive 0.3. So right here. So it will look something like this. So this one is, this point right here is pi eighth negative 0.3. This is 0, 0, obviously, and then this is negative pi eighth positive 0.3. So yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you graph the cotangent. So let me quickly review it. So you take the period. So to find the period, it's pi over b, which is our case pi halves, and then where we got our vertical asymptote is wherever it's pi over 3. So I mean pi over pi fourth, because when you plug in pi fourth into the x, you get pi, which makes it undefined. So wherever there's a pi fourth, you put your vertical asymptote, and then you know how to make make your 5 points. Remember for this part, for pi eighths, how we got pi eighths is you take the period and then you divide it by 4. So pi half divided by 4 is pi eighths. So we're almost done. So our domain is all real numbers except n pi 4, where n equals plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, basically odd numbers, where n is odd, plus or minus 5. And then the range, as you can tell, it's all real numbers, right? So here's the range. It keeps going from positive infinity to negative infinity. So it's negative infinity to positive infinity. And the period is actually pi. Yeah, it's not pi halves. No, it's, sorry, yeah, it's still, take that, it's pi halves. I was just double checking. So yeah, our period is still pi halves, and that is it. That's it. That's how you graph a cotangent graph.